flashing lights dance with fire in the night. I'm wired.
What's up, Rovers? She's finally here, our best magistrate Jinhsi, and with her, the great Sentinel watching over Jinzhu, Jue. I'm sorry this video has taken so long. I've been extremely busy working on many things, but here we are. As usual, all testing is backed by math, and my spreadsheets will be listed in description and pinned for cross-referencing. Now, we'll be covering Jinhsi today in the order of her kit, which I will subdivide into two sections to better understand it. Then Forte leveling priorities, echo sets, main echo choices, main stats and substats, then her weapon choices and comparisons. We will then look at a broader picture of endgame stat goals, her sequences and usefulness to the team, then her respective team options and rotations, how to play them, and a final summary. So let's talk about Jinhsi's kit first. Probably the coolest thing to note is that her entire kit can be used in the air or on the ground, save her base form normal attacks, but oh boy, there is a lot of word vomit here. Each section of her kit is actually pretty straightforward, but going between each section is what gets confusing. She actually has a very rigid rotation due to her cooldowns and where her damage spikes come from. I'll first explain her three main states she can be in before going into everything else to streamline what you should be doing in each state. Now, Jinhsi can be in a normal state, her incarnation state, or ordination glow state. It can only flow forward in that listed order. When she first gets on field, you lead with her echo. In her normal state, nothing on her kit matters for DPS, and your main goal is to basic attack 4 times, so that her skill changes and allows you to go into incarnation state. Intro skilling her will substitute for the basic attacks and allow you to skill into incarnation immediately. When in incarnation state, your goal is to basic attack 4 times to reach ordination glow state to unlock the Dragon Puke skill. Most of your damage comes from the Dragon Puke attack and is also your main source of Concerto energy generation. This is what you want to spam, but it is not possible to charge your Concerto bar in one Dragon Puke, so you would want to chain it twice. However, while you have 10 seconds to do whatever you want in her incarnation state, it has a 12 seconds cooldown on cast. This means even if you can Dragon Puke within 6 seconds of having her on field, you still can't puke a second time. Thus, her playstyle becomes very simple. She is a dual carry quick swap DPS. Every 12 seconds, you put her back on the field to get into incarnation mode and ordination glow so you can Dragon Puke. You ult before swapping off every time it is available, or earlier if you can, but that will not be every rotation due to its high cost and 24 seconds cooldown. If you can ult earlier, it is preferable so that you can animation cancel overflowing radiation, the long skill that puts you in the incarnation state. Now, because her basics are not that useful and she can only liberation ult every other rotation, the majority of her damage comes from her skilled scaling. Basic attacks in incarnation are considered skill damage, and her Dragon Puke is also considered skill damage. As a result, her Forte Circuit is her highest leveling priority. The special versions of her skill come from her Forte Circuit as well, and not her resonance skill tree itself. Thus, even her resonance skill is not as important to level. Her Resonance Liberation, while casted only every other rotation, is her second biggest contributor to DPS, despite being completely dwarfed by her Forte Circuit. Her basic attack tree only includes scaling of her base form, which are entirely useless except for going into Incarnation, so you can level them last. If you're activating Incarnation's skill availability through intro-outro Jinhsi onto the field, you won't even be using her base form normal attacks. Okay, let's look into what she has available. We'll focus on her priority Fortes first. Jinhsi's unique Forte resource is called Incandescence. It has a max bar stack of 50 and is used for a Dragon Puke attack from her Ordination Glow state, the final part of each rotation. Most of her Dragon Puke scaling comes from these stacks and not the skill itself, so Incandescence is extremely important. This can be built by both her and teammates through a stack timer system, whether Jinhsi is on or off field. Anytime anybody on the team deals any kind of damage, even if off-field coordinated damage, it can add into incandescent stacks. 1. Specifically, any unique element can add 1 stack of incandescence every 3 seconds. This incentivizes you to use at least 2 different elements on Jinhsi comps to reliably trigger the element method, since the driver of coordinated attacks can be a different element than the unit that creates them. 2. Any coordinated attacks also separately track unique elements to add 2 incandescences stacks every 3 seconds. This incentivizes you to run coordinated attacks even more, since they add extra stacks independent of the element method. So what are coordinated attacks? Examples include Mortefi's Liberation Mercado hits, Verina's Liberation Arboreal Flourish hits, Yinlin's Forte Judgment Strikes, and Yuanwu's Skill Thunder Wedge all count, and are some of the best partners for Jinhsi. Every Jinhsi team should include at least one of these units for better Dragon Puke scaling. A team like Verina Mortefi can build 4 stacks in 3 seconds due to 2 elements giving 2 stacks and 1 coordinated attack limit giving 2 stacks. Realistically, most of the time Jinhsi will be Dragon Puking with only about 15 to 20 incandescent stacks, without her outro effect active. With it active, she typically pukes for anywhere from 30 to 50 stacks depending on how many coordinated damage units you're running. But how do you actually use her Forte Circuit mechanics, beyond the Dragon Puke itself? Simply put, if you basic attack 4 times in base form or intro skill onto Jinhsi, her resonance skill button will get replaced by Overflowing Radiance. Pressing this new skill puts her in Incarnation State for 10 seconds with an immediate 12 seconds cooldown, which uses Forte Circuit scaling movesets. All basic attacks, heavy attack skill, dodge and dodge counters gain new moves. Notably, the Incarnation mode basic attacks do not reset combo string even if interrupted. None of the other moves except Incarnation skill, Crescent Divinity matter because it's the only move that hits much harder than the Incarnation basics while still being fast and not costing stamina. It also helps to build some concerto. The heavy attack is time consuming and burns stamina. The dodge and counter are quite strong but only used as needed. Using the 4th Incarnation basic attack changes her skill again, forcibly exiting her from the Incarnation state and advances her to the Ordination Glow state. The sole purpose of this 3rd state is to cast your new Dragon Puke skill, Illuminous Epiphany. The resulting explosion will consume all your incandescent stacks to boost its damage. Ordination Glow state lasts for only 5 seconds. Normally, you want to Dragon Puke as soon as possible, but if the enemy is in an awkward position, you can wait and use a basic or 2, which transforms into a special heavy attack that costs stamina while in Ordination Glow. When used in proper rotations, each Dragon Puke will exceed the damage of a Resonance Liberation, but can be cast every time you put her on field, unlike her ult. A 50 stack Incandescence Dragon Puke will deal roughly 2 times or more the damage of a Resonance Liberation at base. Also, casting her Dragon Puke grants her the Unison buff, which is very simple. If your Jinhsi's Concerto bar is full when she swaps off with Unison, you will do your normal intro-outro, but it burns the Unison stack instead of her Concerto bar. That's all it does. It's very finicky building around this gimmick, so I wouldn't think much about it. Its main use is Jinhsi being incapable of filling her entire Concerto bar in one rotation without wasting more time on field and normally needs her dual rotation. So this serves as a way to give her slightly more intro-outro triggers across a prolonged fight. This will allow her to trigger intro-outros every 2 of 3 times you put her on field instead of only half the time. Remember that a 1 second cooldown exists for back swapping. Realistically, if you want to gimmick this, maybe you can squeeze in an extra Verina 4 seconds Concerto rotation, but it's honestly not worth building rotations entirely around how Unison works. There really isn't much to say about her ults though. It does not interact with anything in her kit, and its sole purpose is to deal big AoE damage and generate Concerto energy. It has a big 150 resonance cost, so you will not be able to Liberation ult every time you put her on field. Even if 1 ER elite, it will not be remotely close enough. Her ult also has a 24 seconds cooldown, which actually syncs up perfectly with a dual rotation playstyle, since she can only go into Incarnation once every 12 seconds anyways. Now, as mentioned earlier, the Resonance skill tree only consists of base skill functionality and not the Incarnation or Ordination Glow skill sets. Its sole purpose in proper rotations is for activating Incarnation mode with a new Overflowing Radiance skill after you've either done 4 basic attacks in a row or used Jinhsi's intro skill. Therefore, there isn't much to say about it. Note that Incarnation lasts 10 seconds, but the skill needed to activate it has a 12 seconds cooldown. This means she can also only Dragon Puke once every 12 seconds. Because her rotation is already streamlined to bum rushing the Dragon Puke even at S0, further sequence copies will not change her optimal rotation because they do not allow her to directly go into Incarnation state without using her skill, nor do they reduce or eliminate the cooldown on the Overflowing Radiance skill itself. As mentioned earlier, the normal attack tree only consists of base attack functionality and not the Incarnation or Ordination Glow skill sets. Its sole purpose in proper rotations is to enable the Incarnation activation skill, Overflowing Radiance, after 4 basic attacks in a row. You don't even need to use this if you intro-outroed onto Jinhsi, since that will directly enable the Overflowing Radiance skill. Long's Halo's main purpose is automatically enabling your Overflowing Radiance base skill, which is used to go into Incarnation state without having to do the 4 normal attack combo first. There's not much of a DPS gain from doing this, but introing onto Jinhsi is always preferred because it means an extra unit of shield damage for more full staggers. The second main purpose is for generating concerto energy so that Jinhsi can more reliably use unison and intro-outro effects. Her outro is a rather important part of her Forte Circuit and seems a bit vague on how good it is, so let me clear it up. Remember how I said Jinhsi normally dragon pukes with 15 to 20 incandescent stacks only? If you can successfully outro on her, this cuts down the first unique element tracker to adding 1 incandescent stack every 1 second instead of every 3 seconds. Because her outro buff lasts 20 seconds, it typically lasts long enough until deep into her second rotation, right before she dragon pukes again. This allows it to work even without their unison buff and basically have 100% uptime because Jinhsi already by default can intro-outro once every other rotation. When played correctly, has permanent uptime on her Dragon Puke scaling. In practice, her outro increases the amount of damage her Dragon Puke does by about 1.3 times. Now, her inherent skills are quite simply just straight damage buffs. She gains 50% more total multiplier on her intro skill, which is kind of irrelevant DPS mostly. And she gets plus 20% Spectro damage bonus innately. This Spectro bonus brings just enough resonance percent dilution to make attack percent main stats on echoes a near equal competitor to Spectro percent. Finally, Jinhsi's minor nodes are crit rate and attack percent. She gains 8% crit rate and 12% attack, making her quite simple to build. Echo sets are very simple on Jinhsi. She cannot ult every rotation under any circumstances, which makes Moonlight set not worth it. She would instead use Celestial Light for the plus 40% Spectro damage from 2-piece and 5-piece effects. While the 5-piece effect only triggers off intro skill, you should be intro skilling onto Jinhsi anyways, so that she does not have to waste time doing 4 basic attacks in her base form. If you're running her signature, keep in mind it also requires Jinhsi to intro to get the other half of her skill percent buff from the weapon. The table shown showcases a rough comparison between Celestial Light sets and Lingering Tunes for her signature and Lustrous Razor. Due to Jinhsi's stat dilution from extra Spectral percent from her inherent skill, she actually gets pretty good scaling from Lingering Tunes. This gap closes even more if you're running her signature because it grants an extra 48% resonance skill, which dilutes Spectral percent even further. While I would not recommend targeting Lingering Tunes specifically, it has better scaling than usual versus correct element sets on Jinhsi if you happen to have her signature and happen to have good enough Lingering Tune sets lying around. In all cases though, a properly farmed Celestial set will still surpass Lingering Tunes even with their signature weapon's dilution. Also of note, if you're using a non-crit stick weapon, you cannot use attack percent elites on Lingering Tunes. It will result in a drastic damage fall off as you can see on Lustrous Razor. So let's talk about main stats and substats next. Luckily, these charts easily compare our elite main stats and 44111. As you can see, if you have her signature or crit stick 5-star weapon, you have more options for optimal DPS. This is due to her signature passives and her own inherent spectral percent skill node diluting resonance percent, which includes element percent and anything from your Forte trees like alt percent, skill percent, basic percent, heavy percent. Spectral / attack percent elites are within 1% of double spectral elites, meaning it is actually easier to build her for optimal DPS compared to other carries. Even double attack percent on Spectro set is less than 2% behind for her signature specifically. I would strongly recommend building her for Celestial Light because all of these build options are so similar in peak performance. This makes it much easier to end up with viable elite echoes on set. Now while 44111 is a thing, I would not recommend it for her because it is up to 6 to 10% worse when double spectral percent, spectral attack percent, and double attack percent are all near equal. If you do not have her signature and also do not have a crit stick weapon, double spectral percent is a clear winner on 43311 Celestial Light. However, spectral attack percent is not that far behind at about minus 3.6% DPS, which is equivalent to one single substat total. Double attack percent in Celestial Light is roughly comparable to double spectral on Lingering Tunes. However, I would recommend sticking to Celestial Light because moving from double attack to spectral and attack percent is a pretty big jump and most of the way to 100% scaling. I would absolutely not recommend using 44111 on Lingering Tunes without her signature. It has a massive damage loss from lacking crit sources and resonance percent, scaling only 60% of the optimal setup. 44111 Celestial Light is usable, but I would still recommend aiming for attack percent instead, as that 12% gap is quite noticeable. For substats, Jinhsi's damage profile no matter the weapon you use consists of roughly 75% skill damage, give or take 5%. As a result, skill damage percent is roughly equal to attack flat. Your highest priorities are to get Jinhsi to roughly 125 to 130% ER minimum if you want leeway for ulting every other rotation. Going below 120% ER risk being unable to ult every other time you put her on field if you screw up rotations. Assuming she has sufficient ER, the typical optimal substats hold true, being crit rate and crit damage at the top, followed a fair bit behind by attack percent, and afterwards tied attack flat and skill percent. Heavy, basic, and liberation percent are wasted as she does not do any of those damage types outside of basic attack damage if you fail to intro skill onto her. So what would you use for your main Echo? Jue or Mourning Ikes? This one is very simple. Mourning Ikes has 1.8 seconds cast time for the transformation. Jue is a summon that does not interrupt battle. Their damage and buffs give a roughly 3 to 4% damage advantage to Jue rotations over Mourning Ikes. Now, how much exactly is 3 to 4% worth? That's equal to one single substat. That's it. A single substat. So what I will say is this. Use the one you're more comfortable with, because I know some of you might have a 4 or, if you're super lucky, even a 5 good substat Mourning Ikes already and don't want to refarm. That 1.8 seconds saved is on a total 24-second team rotation if you play clean. Also know that Mourning Ikes' damage is upfront, whereas Jue's damage is partially spread over a longer period of time. In Tower and Holograms, that 1.8 seconds is debatable, but can help you dodge better if you don't need to transform. Take from this what you will. If you have not started farming any Spectro boss echoes at all yet though, I would recommend farming Jue. Do be aware his fight can be annoying to farm even at the 20 level advantage. Of note, Jue counts as coordinated damage and can be used at the end of her half rotation to meet an extra element quota when Jinhsi is off field, since the only other way to get off field Spectro is Verina's ult. Alright, it's time to talk about Jinhsi's weapons, and her signature. As of the time of writing, Jinhsi's signature Age of Harvest has the largest damage parse gap of all signatures so far, relative to their respective standard 5-star weapon counterparts. Age of Harvest R1 does roughly 20% more total damage in a vacuum than Lustrous Razor R1. Whether you should pull for it is up to you, because while the gap is large, Jinhsi also has far more than enough damage and is currently our new damage peak. If you love her a lot, well, I guess the choice is obvious. But at R5, her signature is a meaty, nearly 45% more total damage. But as a reminder, unless you have infinite money to burn, sequences give far more potential damage. Verdant Summit is basically equivalent to her signature, but gutting the most important part of the passive, 24% resonant skill bonus, which results in the big 17% gap across the two weapons. While Verdant Summit seems decent, it is barely better than Lustrous Razor on her, being only roughly plus 5% damage. If you have no one that can use Summit's heavy damage, then feel free to give it to her, but both of their main weapon passives mostly straight up do not apply to her rotations. For 4-star weapons, they're all very similar. The Battle Pass Broadblade Autumn Trace normally scales extremely well with refinements, however, Jinhsi straight up cannot even activate its passive in a proper rotation, making refinements and its passive useless for her. While the craftable Broadblade number 41 scales best with refinements compared to other non-Battle Pass weapons, all the relevant 4-star Broadblades scale from 79 to 83% relative DPS for her. There's zero reason to specifically refine a 4-star Broadblade for her unless you just happen to have spares. Surprisingly, the 3-star Broadblade of Night gets close to the 4-star options, mainly because of how bad passives on Broadblades are in general for her outside of her signature. Do not use Dauntless on her, it is even worse than the 3-star weapon. Now, if you've managed to achieve all that we've discussed so far, then her endgame stats should look a little bit like this. Do keep in mind these are scaled to level 90 with maxed out Fortes, so it will take a bit until you reach this since the game is still new. Take your time and enjoy your ride. But what if you want to wallet? Let's take a look at her sequences. Some considerations have been taken, which I will explain when going over them. All math was done assuming R1 Age of Harvest. Her S1 is basically a guaranteed 80% multiplicative amplifier to the motion value of her Illuminous Epiphany Dragon Puke. Now it only applies to the original values of the Solar Flare and Stella Glamour Explosion. It does not apply to the incandescent stack mechanic. Therefore, the more incandescent stacks you have, the less her S1 matters. In standard rotations, expect this to be around a 10% damage increase. Her S2 is very simple. If she's on field for 4 seconds, she instantly gains 50 incandescent stacks. Most teams will be able to build 30 plus stacks after the first full Jinhsi rotation when her outro and teammate effects are active. Coordinated teams will reasonably hit 40 to 50 incandescent stacks easily. Her S2 mainly accounts for mistakes or allow you to use a 50 stack hit by swapping back to Jinhsi even before teammate outros are ready. In proper later rotations, this is worth on average only a 10% more total damage. S2 Jinhsi is 1.18 times stronger than S0. Her S3 is basically a simple, permanent 50% attack buff for herself that improves her overall damage by 23.3%. S3 Jinhsi is 1.45 times stronger than S0. Her S4 is a party-wide 20% all-element buff when she ults or dragon pukes. It basically has 100% uptime. Note that it affects everyone, but improves their personal damage by only about 7.5%. S4 Jinhsi is 1.56 times stronger than S0. Her S5 is extremely simple. It just adds an extra 120% total multiplier onto her ult. It's a rather small 8.3% personal damage increase. S5 Jinhsi is 1.69 times stronger than S0. Her S6 affects all parts of her Dragon Puke, both the Solar Flare and Stellar Glamour Explosion as well as the Incandescent Stack mechanic. It applies an additional 45% multiplicative amplifier to all of them, which is also her main nuke in her kit. This improves her personal DPS by about 23.4%. S6 Jinhsi is roughly 2.09 times stronger than S0. The next thing to go over are Jinhsi's own rotations. Surprisingly, despite the length of this video, it's very simple. If you're using Mourning Ikes, you will always open with it when she gets on the field. Jue is instead normally used right before she swaps off to maximize off-field coordinated Spectro damage frequencies. There are only two starting situations. She's either entering with an intro skill or not. If she does, you can immediately cast Overflowing Radiance skill to go into Incarnation State. This is the preferred rotation. If you do not have her intro, you will basic attack 4 times to enable the Overflowing Radiance skill instead. I personally prefer animation cancelling her Radiation skill animation with her Liberation Purge of Light, because Radiance has low motion values and can take a long time to cast. If you don't have her ult charged here, don't worry, you can cast it at the end of her half rotation instead. It will still have Mourning Ikes' buff. Once in Incarnation, you open with Crescent Divinity, which has a big motion value and decent animation for it. Then spam 4 basic attacks so you can Dragon Puke with Ordination Glow. If you need to delay due to the fight, you can basic to heavy once or twice. Otherwise, skill to get the big hit and you swap off. If this is a top half rotation, your outro won't be ready unless it's a later rotation with Unison. Your second character does whatever they need to do, just make sure they charge their Concerto bar so Jinhsi can enter with their intro skill again. The next time Jinhsi comes back for the bottom rotation, it's the exact same thing, except you don't cast Echo or Alt since they are on cooldown. You will not be able to animation cancel Overflowing Radiance this time. Get into Incarnation and skill Crescent Divinity, then basic 4 times in Dragon Puke and swap off. Do what you need with your third character and remember to charge their Concerto so that you can intro with Jinhsi when she begins her top rotation again. And that's it. Alright, so it's finally to talk about Jinhsi's teammate options. There are 3 main categories to divide them into: DPS dual carries, buffers, and coordinated attackers. You will preferably want to fill multiple roles with one character. Because Jinhsi is only on the field half the time, she really appreciates another solid DPS to pick up the slack, as Jinhsi has 0 off-field damage herself. Buffers help to spike her burst damage, Dragon Puke that much higher as well. Coordinated attackers are extremely good at stacking her incandescence mechanic because they both count as unique elements, but coordinated attacks at the same time, possibly building 3 stacks in a single hit, stacking cooldowns permitting. Therefore, I will identify her teammates based on which of these team roles they fill. Up, first, front, and center, perhaps her best teammate is his best time to shine, Yuanwu. You might think this is unusual. Why not Mortefi, or Yinlin, or any other coordinated attacker that deals more damage? Now, Yuanwu is the only coordinated attacker in the game who can activate it without requiring any setup at all. Yinlin requires a Forte bar, Mortefi requires his Liberation, Verina requires Liberation and is also hogged by many other teams. The only other team Yuanwu might be considered in currently are Yinlin Calchero teams, so this gives them a comfortable team to call home. Yinlin is much better for Calchero DPS teams, and Yuanwu serves more as a comfort choice. However, Yuanwu enables Jinhsi to build incandescent stacks when you run it with her much more earlier than Yinlin, and also needs almost zero field time besides just placing his totem, which also builds his forte off field. You can even use the Originite weapon and carry healer set on him if you don't want him to do damage at all, and just buff your Jinhsi more. You trade Yinlin's high damage for a fast, reliable, and immediate incandescence charge. The other coordinated attackers fit the bill quite well too, but take time to set up on the first rotation. Yinlin fills the dual carry and coordinated attacker role and is probably the second best unit for her, and is extremely good for longer fights due to her high damage, 100% coordinated attack uptime after the first rotation, and fast concerto generation. Jinhsi will not be able to consistently take advantage of Yinlin's outros, but that doesn't matter because Yinlin already brings the highest off-field damage available. Verina is the next choice, a coordinated attacker who is also a buffer but is limited by sharing elements with Jue, and thus cannot count as a unique element for stacking incandescence. However, she brings coordinated attacks, elemental damage deepen, and attack percent. She also brings heals as needed and a very fast concerto generation rotation. She's quite well suited for Mourning Ike's comps which do not have off-field Spectro from Jue. The weakest choice of the coordinated attackers would be Mortefi, but he is still a strong choice due to being a sub-DPS. His Liberation Mercados can generate quite a bit of an incandescent stacks by consistently triggering the 1 second's cooldown if Jinhsi's outro is active. However, he's quite dependent on sequences as his base 10 seconds coordinated attack window leaves a bit to be desired. His S4 adds a massive 7 seconds cooldown which covers almost 2 full Jinhsi rotations right before she pukes again. He also builds ultimate energy slower than typical Verina builds and Yinlin, and his outro is not useful for Jinhsi as well as building concerto energy slower than the aforementioned units. However, being a coordinated attacker already makes Mortefi a good choice. Let's talk about dedicated buffers next. We have already mentioned Verina. The remaining ones are Taoqi, Yangyang, and Baizhi. Sadly, the news is not so good. Taoqi is an extremely strong buffer for Jinhsi, bringing an outro with 38% skill deepen as a final multiplier to Jinhsi's already sky-high damage. However, that is all Taoqi brings. A kit that is still waiting for level 90 defense scaling with heavily but not full defense kit scaling, and a concerto that is slow to charge. It is not recommended to run Taoqi with Jinhsi unless you want to see the biggest numbers possible or do not have better options. She will elongate your team's rotations or reduce the amount of intro outros available if you try to maintain the same team rotation length. Yangyang brings grouping to the table so that she can more reliably AoE nuke, but realistically this is only useful for enemies that are way too far off. On the other hand, she still fails to bring enemies at the very edges of tower inwards, which is something that Jianxin can do. Now, I did not mention Jianxin here because all she does is bring a better group than Yangyang for Jinhsi comps. Her outro buffs are negligible because Jinhsi's ult only makes up 20% of her damage profile. In Yangyang's outro case, it gets an honorable mention mainly to warn you that it is not enough to allow Jinhsi to ult every time you put her on field. But on top of that, remember Jinhsi has a 24 seconds cooldown on her ult. So she is very pigeonholed into a dual rotation playstyle. I would not recommend either Yangyang or Jianxin for Jinhsi teams. Baizhi is worse than usual compared to Verina here because Jinhsi actually wants Verina's coordinated attacks. Baizhi only brings some heals and buffs. Baizhi is noticeably slower to charge Concerto than Verina and does not provide coordinated attacks. However, she can carry the healer set and activate it quite easily, so you can substitute her into Jinhsi teams as needed if you don't have other options. For other dual carries, I will not get in-depth since their own kits can be complicated, but you can run anyone that does not demand a long field time to deal DPS, usually in the 6 to 8 seconds window. Good options include Danjin and Sanhua, which are DPSs that require very short on-field time to apply their debuffs and DPS loops. A final honorable mention goes to Spectro Rover, who brings a 10% defense Spectro shred on her S6. I know some people will mention this because we finally got her Spectro S6 in update 1.1, but I would not recommend doing this. Spectro Rover brings almost nothing to the table besides this defense shred, and doing a worse dual DPS job than Danjin or Sanhua, but does bring a 3 seconds outro slow. However, I know some of you will still do it, as I love Spectro Rover, so I will probably do this occasionally here and there, running the friendship team with our best magistrate together. Thank you so much for watching through this entire video. I've been extremely busy and barely had enough time to put this guide together, but it was plenty of fun. I hope the information has been useful to help you decide on whether to pull or how to build or play Jinhsi. As a reminder, all spreadsheets documenting my testing can be found in the description and pinned comment. Do feel free to make a copy if you want to change values and test stuff. Cheers! If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Stick around if you want to see interesting videos on a nearly daily basis. Don't miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching and see you all